believe that's going to empower, encourage, and inspire you to be the best version of yourself. Is that okay? So, today I want to talk about being strong and empowered by faith. Being strong and empowered by faith. And this is part of what we've been talking about in this previous session about faith. And we know that faith is a substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. But sometimes we can get discouraged in waiting for what we're believing for. And so that's what I want to talk to you about this morning. And we're going to be reading from Hebrews chapter 11 and the 12th verse, okay? And Hebrews chapter 11 and 12 says this: Therefore spring there even of one of him as good as dead, as many as the stars of the sky in multitude, and as the sand by which the seashore is innumerable. Let's read this in the Amplified version because I like the Amplified version. So it says, so from one man, though he was physically and good as dead, were born as many descendants as the stars of heaven in number, and innumerable as the sand on the seashore. We're talking about the promise of Abraham, the promise of God that he promised to Abraham and Sarah that they would conceive a child, and that Abraham would be a father of many nations. But you know how it is. How many times have God promised you something, but you're looking at your situation, you're like, you're right. And I'm just looking at Abraham and Sarah at the age that they're in, the situation that they're in, the circumstance, it doesn't look promising. It doesn't look like this is doable. Like, how, right? So that's what makes faith such a great and powerful tool, because faith does not need to know how. Faith doesn't require you to do anything but to believe. And so here it is, God had promised Abraham that he would have a son, and now they're in their old age, past the season where you believe, where one would normally have children, right? So I want to encourage you this morning, because sometimes it can be weary in waiting. And I know what that's like, because I'm going to keep sharing my testimony about how we were trying to get this house, and it seemed like it was never going to happen. Like we went through so many different things, and the circumstances that we were in at the time, it didn't seem possible. But that's what makes faith. Faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. And even though we could not see how we would be able to get and obtain our house, our faith, believing in God, and we kept at it. We didn't give up. And sometimes I thought that the situation was not conducive for God to work in. You understand what I mean? Sometimes we think we need God's help, like Sarah did. She was like, Abraham, just go ahead and have the baby with my handmaid, and we'll just let that be the promise. That's not what God said. God doesn't need our help. So I want to encourage you this morning to be strong and empowered by faith, because your faith is what's going to produce what God promised. And it's not dependent upon our time, because God moves off of his word and in his timing. Okay? So let's read a little bit more. In Romans 4:19, it says, and being not weak in faith, he considered not his own body now dead, when he was about 100 years old, neither yet the deadness of Sarah's womb. God will still stand on his word, regardless of how dead a situation looks. As a matter of fact, I think God gets more out of the situation looking impossible, because he wants to show us how great and mighty he is, how powerful his word is, and our situation does not determine whether or not God will be able to come through for us or not. So this morning I want to let you know not to set any limitation. Don't put any boundaries on what God can do, because despite the fact that Sarah and Abraham were way past their age of bringing forth a child, they believed, they received what God said, and conceived it, and as a result, they produced the fruit. What was the fruit? The fruit of God's word was the child that God promised, and it came to pass. And not only that, here it is, years later, we're still seeing the fruit of Abraham because we're the heirs. He said it would be innumerable. And how many people? Can we count how many people? We cannot. So I want to encourage you today not to give up on God's word, because God is faithful and he will come through for you. Be encouraged, be inspired, and motivated by your faith. Get up and go get it.